The autumn leaves danced gently outside Sarah's bedroom window as she sat at her vanity, staring at her reflection. Her wedding dress hung nearby, a simple but elegant creation of ivory silk that caught the morning light. Today was the day she would marry Michael Hartford, and her heart was a mixture of nervous excitement and quiet uncertainty. Sarah had met Michael 6 months ago at a charity fundraiser in downtown Chicago. She had been working as a nurse at the children's hospital, pulling double shifts to make ends meet after her father's medical bills had drained the family savings. Michael had been in a wheelchair, speaking passionately about his foundation's work with disabled veterans. When their eyes met across the crowded ballroom, something had sparked between them. Michael was everything Sarah had never expected to find. He was intelligent, kind, and surprisingly funny. He had made his fortune in tech before a car accident 3 years earlier had left him paralyzed from the waist down. But rather than letting it defeat him, he had channeled his energy into helping others. Their courtship had been gentle and sweet, filled with long conversations over coffee and quiet dinners at his penthouse apartment. What troubled Sarah wasn't Michael's disability. She had fallen genuinely in love with his gentle spirit and sharp mind. What kept her awake at night was the nagging feeling that she was somehow being dishonest. When Michael had proposed, offering her a life of comfort and security, she had said yes, not just out of love, but out of relief. Her mother's arthritis was getting worse, and the medical bills kept piling up. Michael's wealth could solve all of their problems. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," her mother Margaret said softly as she entered the room. Margaret moved slowly, her hands swollen with arthritis, but her eyes were bright with happiness. "Mom, do you think I'm doing the right thing?" Sarah asked, turning to face her mother. Margaret sat carefully on the edge of the bed, studying her daughter's face. "Sarah, I've watched you these past months. I've seen how your face lights up when you talk about Michael. That's not something you can fake." Sarah nodded, but the worry remained. I want to make sure I'm marrying him for the right reasons." "Love isn't just one thing, honey," Margaret said gently. "It's caring for someone, wanting to make them happy, feeling safe with them. Michael makes you smile in a way I haven't seen since your father passed. That's not nothing." The wedding was to be held at Michael's estate outside the city, a sprawling property with gardens that overlooked Lake Michigan. Sarah had been surprised when Michael insisted on a small ceremony, just family and close friends. For someone with his wealth and social standing, she had expected something grander. As Sarah arrived at the estate in her mother's old car, she had refused Michael's offer of a limousine. She was struck by how peaceful everything looked. White chairs were arranged in neat rows on the back lawn, facing an archway covered in autumn flowers. The lake sparkled in the distance, and the air smelled of fallen leaves and the last roses of the season. Michael's sister Jennifer greeted Sarah at the back entrance. Jennifer was a warm woman in her 40s who had welcomed Sarah into the family without reservation. "You look absolutely radiant," Jennifer said, giving Sarah a careful hug. "Michael is so nervous he can barely sit. Still, I haven't seen him this excited about anything since before his accident." As Jennifer led Sarah to a small room where she could wait before the ceremony, Sarah noticed something odd. The house, which she had visited several times, seemed different somehow. There were more people around than usual, catering staff. Yes, but also several people in suits who looked more like business associates than wedding vendors. "Jennifer," Sarah said carefully, "is everything okay? There seem to be a lot of people here today." Jennifer paused, and for a moment Sarah saw something flicker across her face, excitement mixed with what looked like nervousness. "Everything's fine," Jennifer said. "Michael he has a surprise for you. He's been planning it for weeks." Before Sarah could ask more questions, the sound of a string quartet drifted through the windows. It was time. Sarah's heart pounded as she walked down the aisle, her arm linked with her mother's. The guests were a small group. Her mother, a few cousins, Michael's sister and parents, and several friends from the hospital where Sarah worked. But as she had noticed earlier, there were also several people she didn't recognize, all watching the ceremony with unusual intensity. Michael waited at the altar in his wheelchair, wearing a dark blue suit that brought out his eyes. When he saw Sarah approaching, his face lit up with such genuine joy that all her doubts melted away. This was real. This was right. The ceremony itself was beautiful and simple. They had written their own vows, and when Michael spoke about how Sarah had brought light back into his life after years of darkness, there wasn't a dry eye in the small gathering. "Sarah," Michael said, his voice steady despite the emotion Sarah could see in his eyes. "You saw me not as a man limited by his circumstances, but as someone worth loving. You gave me hope when I had forgotten what it felt like." Sarah's own vows spoke of finding strength in kindness and love in unexpected places. "Michael, you taught me that real wealth isn't about money. It's about having someone who believes in your dreams and supports your heart." After they exchanged rings and shared their first kiss as husband and wife, Michael took Sarah's hands in his. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you," he said, loud enough for all the guests to hear. "I haven't been completely honest with you." Sarah's heart stopped. The mysterious guests, Jennifer's nervous excitement, the unusual formality of some of the people present, suddenly it all felt ominous. "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael's eyes were bright with tears, but he was smiling. "Sarah, 3 weeks ago, I got a call from my doctor. There's been a breakthrough in spinal cord research. A new treatment that could potentially restore some function to my legs." Sarah stared at him, not understanding. "I've been accepted into the program," Michael continued. "But more than that, Sarah, yesterday I took my first steps in 3 years." The crowd gasped, and Sarah felt the world spinning around her. "I wanted to surprise you," Michael said. "I wanted our marriage to begin with hope, not just acceptance." Slowly, carefully, Michael placed his hands on the arms of his wheelchair. Sarah watched in amazement as he pushed himself up, his legs shaking but supporting his weight. With tremendous effort and obvious determination, he took one small step toward her, then another. Sarah burst into tears as Michael reached for her hands. He was standing, trembling with the effort, but standing, and his eyes were full of joy and love and the most beautiful hope she had ever seen. "I wanted to dance with my wife at our wedding," he said softly. The string quartet began to play again, and there, on the lawn overlooking Lake Michigan, Sarah and Michael swayed together in what could barely be called dancing but felt like the most beautiful waltz in the world. As they held each other, Sarah realized that all her worries about marrying for security had been unnecessary. She had found something much more valuable than financial stability. She had found a partner who would face life's challenges with courage and grace, who would surprise her with hope when she least expected it. The mysterious guests, she learned, later were doctors and researchers from the medical program, along with a few reporters who had been documenting Michael's recovery. The whole thing had been planned as a surprise, not just for Sarah, but as a way to give hope to others facing similar challenges. As the sun set over the lake and their small group of loved ones celebrated around them, Sarah and Michael sat together on the porch of their new home. Michael was back in his wheelchair. The walking was still difficult and limited, but the hope in his eyes had transformed everything. "Are you disappointed that your surprise got out?" Sarah asked, leaning against his shoulder. Michael laughed, the sound rich and full of contentment. "Sarah, the biggest surprise of all is that I get to spend my life with someone who loves me enough to marry me in a wheelchair and who cries with joy when I can take 2 steps. That's worth more than any surprise I could have planned." Sarah smiled, watching the first stars appear over the lake. She had thought she was marrying a disabled millionaire out of a mixture of love and necessity. Instead, she had married her best friend, her partner, and the person who would spend their life showing her that the most beautiful surprises come not from what we expect, but from the courage to hope for what seems impossible. Their love story was just beginning, and Sarah knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, one step at a time.